Hello there, YouTubers. Well, today I'm working on warping up my loom for my next project, which is going to be an OverShot Gamp. I'll give you some details on the pattern in a little bit, but just want to show you the beginning of counting out the warp threads. Well, not the beginning of it. I've been doing this for a couple hours now, but I'm going to show you a part of counting out the warp threads and measuring them. So let's move the camera down and aim it at the warping board and see how I do this. There we are, we're aimed at the warping board. I'm putting on a white thread now, and it's probably harder than the dickens for you to see because I'm using a fairly fine thread. But you can see I just go around, back and forth, measuring things out. Now, as I think I've told you before, I have a rather uncommon habit of tying threads in very small bunches when I'm doing this because it helps me make sure that I get them correctly threaded into the rattle. So there's just a marker for tying. Now I only needed 2 white, and my next thread is going to be red. So we're tying up a red one, just put an end knot into it. Slip that over the peg, and we'll go up and do some red. I want 4 threads of red, so that's 2 ends at the top the way I count. Back and forth. I'm putting on 5 yards of warp here. And again, the way I've got my warping board set up, I purposely did this. Each trip across the warping board is a yard. So that helps me with my measuring. Now we're going back to white again. And I'll just do couple more of those, and then we'll turn the camera off. And I haven't decided whether the next thing I'm going to show you is putting it onto the loom or a copy of the pattern itself. I'll make that decision before I get too much farther, but that's really part of the editing process. So that'll be one of those 2 things will be next. There we are, we've got some of the threads on, and there's a long way to go. You've seen me warping, measuring out the warp and counting my threads on the warping board, but I thought I'd take a moment to show you what I do on paper is how I prepare for this counting. Basically, I go to the computer and I make a little spreadsheet saying how many threads I need of each color. So I've got white and red and white and red, and I've highlighted the red with an orange magic marker just to help me see them. As I wind on a set of threads that I want to bring over to the loom, as soon as I've got it counted out, I go over and I just cross off the number that I need and subtract out what I've already wound on, leaving myself what I need to wind on next. So the last thing I had here was a number 17. I wound on 5 threads, and that finished off my set, so I came over and marked it down. 17 minus 5 is 12. Okay, I'm going to do 12 more of white, then I'm going to have to do 4 of red. And then I've got 21 of white, then 3 of red to do, and then 4 of white. So this is just kind of a running total that helps me count where I'm at for the threads. It's, you know, if I'm on a case of doing all one color, I just keep a total running count of how many total threads I've got. But when I have to be very specific about how many of each color, and that number varies depending on how far I am across the warp, I like to use a sheet like this to just help me keep track of what I'm doing. So that's kind of how I keep track of the counts, and for those of you who maybe are weavers or would like to consider trying your hand at weaving, these are just some of the techniques that I have found over time help me know where I'm at as I'm preparing the warp to put on the loom. And take it or leave it, whatever works best for you. I mean, everybody's going to figure out their own methods, but this is something that does help me to keep track of the count on the threads as I'm putting the warp on.
I'm going to try in this part of the video to show a little of how I plan what I'm going to weave. First, I should mention that I'm using a program named Fiberworks PCW Silver as my tool for doing the planning, and this is what you can see of it. So with this pattern, there are 4 shafts, or there are 4 parts in this program, I should say. Okay, and I'm only going to show you one of those at this point. So the first part of this is the set of boxes along the top of the screen. You can see them where my cursor, which looks like a pencil, is right now. Okay, and this is the part where I plan the threading, or how the warp threads are set up on the shafts. If you think back to my other weaving videos that you've seen, the warp threads are lifted up, some of them are lifted up and some are pulled down, and that creates an opening that the shuttle can go through. And each of the sets of threads is on a harness, or sometimes it's called a frame or a shaft, depending on who's describing it. Anyways, the top set of boxes here are where I plan for which threads get controlled by which shaft. So here I'm going to do some clicking on the first row, which represents the first shaft. So there it is. I have clicked 2 boxes that represents the first shaft. That would mean I was going to thread 2 threads on shaft number 1. Here I'm clicking on 2 threads of shaft number 2, then 2 threads of shaft number 3, then 2 threads of shaft number 4. And you can see that is how that represents it. And I think you can see by the way those are that that's what I'll be doing. Okay. Now my loom has more shafts than 4, but this pattern only calls for 4 shafts, so that's why I've got it set up in this display to only show 4 shafts. So the black boxes represent, each one of these black boxes represents 1 thread that I run through the loom from front to back or from back to front. Okay, so now I'm just going to clear all of that and start over again, but using the keyboard instead of the cursor and clicking to put in the pattern that I actually plan to weave. And you'll be able to see that as I click on it. Okay, so here I go clicking on that pattern. Okay, so that's the threading pattern that I'm going to follow. Now, I've got those planned. I know that in the pattern I'm going to use most of my threads will be white, but some of them will be red. So just help me know exactly where my red threads are. I'm going to put an indicator up here. That's where the threads will be that are going to be red when I'm planning it. The rest of this area I'm not going to go into detail with now. Suffice to say that this little set of boxes here, this bigger long set of boxes here, and this big white area all have a function. But for now I'm just going to leave them alone, because the only thing I want for now, for the first part of this pattern, is to plan my threads that get put on the various shafts. And we'll just leave it at that for now, and we'll go over to the loom and start putting the threads through to follow this pattern.
Alright, I'm at the loom and I'm going to begin the threading, following the pattern that I just showed you on the computer. So my first thread I'm going to grab, and it goes through a heddle on shaft number 4. Then the next thread that I grab is going to be on shaft number 3. And I'm very aware that these are thin threads and it's probably difficult for you to see all this, but I'm trying to give you as good an idea of the process here as I can, and the only way to do that is to actually do it with the real piece of equipment and the real thread. So this third thread went through shaft number 2. This fourth thread goes through a heddle on shaft number 1. I'm going to just push those off to the side a little bit, grab my next 4 heddles and move them over, and let's do this again. First thread, shaft number 4, the next thread I should say, shaft number 4. Now a thread on shaft number 3. And I can always know what my next thread is, because the way I've got them through the leaf sticks back there, they just set up such that I can always grab the very next one. Next one here is through shaft number 2. Now the last of my white ones for this first grouping is going to go on shaft number 1. Then if you remember correct from before, I had 7 threads of red. So I'm going to grab the first of the red threads. It's going on shaft number 4. The next of the red ones is going on shaft number 3. The next of the red is on shaft number 2. And we'll move that over, and then finally one on shaft number 1. Okay, now we've been going 4 3 2 1 4 3 2 1 4 3 2 1. We want to go back the other way. So the next 3 threads are going to be on shafts 2, 3, and 4. So here comes the next one. This goes on shaft number 2. Then shaft number 3. A heddle on shaft 3, I should say. And a heddle on shaft 4 is next. I've got an extra red thread back there because the way I do my warp counting, it just always comes out in even numbers, so I'm just going to ignore that red thread for the moment. My next thread is going to be a white one, and it's going on. So now we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll bring these heddles over, go for heddle on shaft 1. Next is going to go to shaft 2. Now shaft 3. I hope you're able to see this. I really do. And shaft 4. Okay, after that, our pattern says to do shaft 1 and shaft 2, and then shaft 1 and shaft 2 again. So let's grab just 2 heddles, and we'll go into shaft 1, then shaft 2. shaft 1, move it out of the way, shaft 2, and we'll move this out of the way after we get it in there. Now we'll just do a couple more, shaft 1 and shaft 2 again. So we'll grab the next thread. Having a hard time grabbing that one. There we go. Goes on shaft 1. And next thread goes on shaft 2. Okay. There's that. I have moved the camera just a little bit and added a little bit more lighting at the back, and we're going to do just a few more threads. So the next set of threads is going to be 3-2, so I'm going through shaft number 3 right now. Move it out of the way just to create myself some working room. Grab the next thread from the back, and it's going on shaft 2. Move that out of the way. The next thread is going to be 3-4, so we'll move those over, grab the next thread, shaft 3, and then grab a thread for shaft 4. And you can, if you go back to my pattern that I had, maybe I'll find a way to do a picture-in-picture. I'm not sure if I can do that or not. You can see that I'm following the pattern that we set up for doing the threading. So now we're going through shaft 3, grabbing the next thread, and going to shaft 4. Okay. The other thing I want you to kind of notice is the way I've got this done is that if you think of it in sets of 2, okay, 2 threads going through, so always going first through an odd numbered shaft, that was shaft 1, and then to an even numbered shaft, so that was shaft 1. Now I'm going to shaft 4, and by doing that I can set my treadle such that I can have what's called a tabby weave as my base, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But there you go. That's as far as I'm going to try taking the threading for this point. Well, I've finished the threading of my loom, and I've got everything tied up, and I'm almost ready to start weaving. I want to take some time in another video to show you something about the tie-up and how I've got that done. But for the moment, let's just say that I've got the threading done, and that's what I really wanted to accomplish in this first video of dealing with the overshot. So let's take just a quick look down here. You can see that I've got all my threads in here. Everything is tied up, and if I move a treadle I can open the shed, but that I've done no weaving so far. So come on back up here. That's all there is for this particular video. There is certainly more to this project, and I hope to do 1 or 2 more videos dealing with this OverShot Gamp project. So thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for more. If you like my videos, I certainly would appreciate if you would subscribe to my channel, and if you're already a subscriber, that's great. Thanks. I really do appreciate your taking the time to watch my videos. Bye-bye for now.